A single mom was rejected for bringing her child to an interview until the millionaire CEO walked in. "You brought a child to an interview." Brenda's voice sliced through the sleek, quiet lobby of Grant & Company sharp as a slap. Her heels clicked on the polished floor as she crossed her arms, glaring down at the young woman before her. Brenda paused, a hand on her chin, then spoke wearily. Autumn Hayes clutched a manila folder tightly to her chest, striving to keep her voice steady. "I had no choice. I couldn't leave her alone." Her daughter Ellie, a 3-year-old with blonde curls bouncing around her sweet round face, stood quietly beside her. Tiny shoes occasionally scuffed the gleaming floor. Ellie wore a small blue dress carefully chosen from a donation bin and hand-washed by Autumn the previous night. Her large, curious eyes flitted around the impressive glass building, completely oblivious to the palpable tension in the room. Brenda scoffed, turning to the receptionist with an air of annoyance. "We screen for professionalism here, not playdates." "I understand," Autumn responded softly. "But I am here. I came prepared, and I have everything you asked for." "You clearly didn't prepare well enough," Brenda snapped, her voice sharp. "This is a corporate interview, Ms. Hayes, not a daycare center." Autumn flinched at the harsh words, yet she remained rooted to the spot. Ellie, sensing her mother's distress, looked up and found Autumn's fingers with her small hand. Autumn gently squeezed back, forcing a reassuring smile for her child, even as her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Brenda then turned to a security guard nearby, ready to issue an instruction. "Can we have someone escort?" A tiny gasp interrupted Brenda's sentence. Ellie had accidentally bumped a paper cup perched precariously on the receptionist's desk. Water spilled with a soft splash, spreading across the pristine marble floor. Autumn dropped to her knees, instantly fumbling for tissues in her bag to dab at the growing puddle. "I'm so sorry. Please, she didn't mean to—" Autumn pleaded, her voice distressed. Yet no one moved to help. No one spoke. Only the distant clicking of keyboards from the reception area echoed in the heavy silence. Autumn remained crouched, scrubbing the floor, while her daughter watched silently. Her worn gray heels scraped softly, and her hands trembled slightly. The air around her felt thick, heavy, with unspoken judgment. Just then, the elevator chimed, and a man in a charcoal gray suit emerged. Tall, composed, and radiating unmistakable power, he moved with the effortless grace of someone accustomed to being observed. The receptionist immediately straightened in her seat, and even Brenda froze in place. This was Logan Whitmore, the CEO of Grant & Co., a name frequently featured in business magazines and Forbes profiles. At 35, he had already built an empire, though few at the company had ever seen him in person. He wasn't supposed to be there today. Yet there he stood, pausing mid-step, his brows drawing slightly together as he took in the entire scene. A woman kneeling on the floor cleaning spilled water with a child beside her, a manager glaring, and a room full of people pretending not to notice. His voice was calm, deep, and unhurried. "Why don't you tell me why you're here, Miss—" Autumn looked up startled. "Hayes," she managed to say. "Autumn Hayes." He nodded, gesturing towards the seating area. "Let's sit." Brenda blinked, then interjected. "Sir, this candidate brought a child." "I can see that," Logan replied smoothly, his gaze unwavering. "And I can also see she is here on time with all her materials ready. So let's hear what she has to say." Autumn's eyes widened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. Brenda looked as if she had just swallowed a lemon. Logan didn't flinch. He pulled out a chair for Autumn, then sat down himself, elbows on his knees, his eyes meeting hers directly. Ellie, sensing the shift in atmosphere, quietly climbed into her mother's lap, now calm once more. "Take your time," Logan said gently, encouraging her. "Start wherever makes sense." Autumn swallowed the lump in her throat, her hands absently smoothing Ellie's dress as she reached for her resume. "I applied for the admin support position. I saw it posted online and thought maybe it could be a fresh start." He nodded slowly, prompting her, "Why now?" Autumn glanced down at her daughter, a profound weariness in her eyes. Because I can't afford to wait anymore. For the first time that morning, the room held something other than judgment. It held collective breath, then curiosity, and finally the beginning of something truly unexpected. If you've ever felt invisible in a room like this, or needed someone to truly see you, stay with this story. What Logan Whitmore does next might just restore your faith in second chances. Tap the hype button if you believe everyone deserves to be seen. Brenda hovered just behind the seating area, arms folded tightly, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't utter a word, but her strong disapproval hung heavily in the air. Logan ignored her completely. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his voice low but intensely focused. "Let's start with your story, Ms. Hayes." Autumn took a slow, steady breath. Ellie sat quietly in her lap now, idly fiddling with the corner of her mother's jacket. "I lost my husband 2 years ago," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "A car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light." Logan's eyes didn't flinch at the raw confession. "I'm sorry," he murmured. Autumn gave a small nod, the kind of subtle acknowledgement people offer when they've already shed all the tears they possess. "I was just 23, Autumn continued, and had just begun a part-time certificate in office administration. "I thought it would help us get ahead, but then everything simply fell apart." She explained her lack of family support. "My parents passed away when I was a teenager, and my husband's family cut contact after the funeral. I've been raising Ellie entirely on my own ever since." Ellie's head perked up hearing her name. Autumn gave her a soft kiss on the forehead and resumed her story. "I've worked wherever I could. In cafes, retail, even evening cleaning shifts. I applied to Grant & Coney because I heard you had internal training programs. I thought if I could just get in the door." Logan glanced down at the resume in his hand. It was simple, sparse, yet impeccably clean and honest. "And you're still finishing school?" he asked. She nodded. "Online courses late nights after Ellie is asleep." Logan looked at Ellie. The little girl was now quietly tapping her feet in a gentle rhythm, calm and still, as if instinctively knowing her mother needed the silence. He turned back to Autumn, his expression thoughtful. "And today, why bring her with you?" Autumn's voice wavered slightly. "I couldn't afford childcare this week. I lost my apartment last Friday, and we're currently staying in a weekly motel while I look for something more stable. I simply couldn't bear to leave her there alone, not even for an hour." Autumn straightened her shoulders, then a subtle act of defiance. "I know it's unprofessional, but I also knew this was my only chance, so we got dressed, practiced interview questions, and came here." Brenda finally cut in from behind, her voice tight. "We can always reschedule without the child." But Logan raised a hand, cutting her off. "She came here prepared. We finish this now." Brenda blinked, momentarily stunned. Logan turned back to Autumn, his gaze firm. "Would you be willing to take a 2-week trial position, entry-level office support? You would report directly to me." Autumn's breath caught in her throat. She blinked once, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Yes," she said quickly, a burst of hope in her voice. "Absolutely yes. I will have someone from HR draw up the paperwork by the end of day," Logan stated. Autumn's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Ellie, not fully understanding the words but sensing the positive shift, let out a tiny cheer and clapped her hands. Meanwhile, Brenda looked utterly stunned. Logan simply stood buttoning his jacket. "You can start Monday. There's a small on-site daycare here. We'll make sure Ellie is placed." He nodded politely. "Welcome to Grant & Coney, Ms. Hayes." Autumn rose to her feet, cradling Ellie in one arm and clutching her folder in the other. For a moment she simply stood there, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. There was no pity exchanged between them, only a profound sense of respect. As she turned to leave, Logan looked down at Ellie and said quietly, "You did great today." Ellie smiled brightly and offered him a wrinkled, heart-shaped sticker from her pocket. He took it without a moment's hesitation. In that quiet moment, without any grand fanfare, something truly shifted. This was no longer just an interview. It was a new beginning. Logan Whitmore was a man meticulously driven by systems. His mornings began precisely at 5:30 sharp, one black coffee, a 20-minute workout, emails by 6:00 a.m., his driver waiting at 6:45 a.m., and by 7:15 a.m., he was settled in his glass-walled office. From there, he overlooked the vibrant pulse of Manhattan, presiding as CEO of one of the city's fastest-growing firms. By 35, he possessed everything a man was supposedly meant to desire: a penthouse apartment that seemed straight out of a luxury magazine, a perfectly tailored wardrobe, updated each season, and articles hailing him as a visionary, a disruptor, the next Elon Musk. Yet at the end of every day, he dined alone. His grand apartment, he often felt, echoed far too much when the rain fell. He never spoke of the fire, the one that had claimed his 7-year-old sister Lily when he was just 12. Bright-eyed and always drawing butterflies, she was a vivid memory. He had never forgiven himself for not reaching her in time. Since that day, silence had become his sanctuary, and work his impenetrable shield. Emotions were neatly folded and tucked away, much like his perfectly pressed suits. But something profound began to shift after Autumn Hayes walked into his company, her sleeves slightly frayed, a child by one hand and an unwavering dignity in the other. She started the following Monday, clearly nervous yet punctual and unfailingly polite. Autumn asked thoughtful questions, stayed late to complete her training modules, and never once used Ellie as an excuse, not even when her daughter caught a cold midweek. Logan observed her from a quiet distance, not out of obligation, but from a growing desire to understand. One afternoon, stepping out of a meeting, Logan paused at the corridor's end. Through the glass break room door, he saw Autumn sitting at a small table, her own tray of food untouched. Across from her sat Mr. Reyes, one of the older janitors typically avoided by the office crowd. Autumn was carefully sliding half of her sandwich towards him, perfectly cut in two. "I had extra," she said with a warm smile, though she looked hungry herself. She offered it anyway. Logan said nothing, just watched, feeling something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. The next day presented a different scene. Logan was leaving his office late when he overheard sharp, impatient voices echoing down the hallway. "You cannot keep leaving early, Autumn. The rest of us are covering your workload." A coworker snapped, "This isn't daycare." "I was 5 minutes late to pick her up," Autumn replied quietly but firmly. "I stayed late last night to finish all my reports." "That's not the point," the coworker retorted. Logan turned the corner and saw Autumn standing by her desk, her shoulders drawn inward, lips pressed together. Her daughter wasn't physically present, but the unspoken weight of her responsibility lingered in the coworker's scalding words. Autumn caught sight of him and immediately straightened, not in a plea but in preparation to simply endure. Logan looked at the other employee and said evenly, "You can go." The woman blinked, starting to protest, "But I was just—" "I know," Logan cut in. "You can go." Once they were alone, Logan stepped closer. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Autumn hesitated for a moment. "Yes, sir." He looked at her for a long, silent moment, then said, "Take tomorrow off." She blinked in surprise. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "You didn't," he interrupted gently. "You've earned it." Her lips parted, but no words came out. He didn't wait for thanks, simply nodded and walked away. Yet, as he rode the elevator down to the garage, his thoughts were louder than usual. He remembered the way Autumn's eyes had darkened, not with defeat, but with quiet restraint. He recalled the sticker Ellie had given him last week. He hadn't removed it, and it was still stuck inside his day planner. For the first time in years, Logan felt something stir within him, something warm and unfamiliar, like the gentle insistence of spring against a window still frosted from winter. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of vibrant spring day that made New Yorkers believe summer had arrived early. Central Park buzzed with the gentle strumming of guitar music, distant echoes of laughter, and the steady rhythm of joggers. Logan Whitmore didn't typically walk through the park. He found it too public, too unpredictable. But today his driver had dropped him off early, and Logan told himself he simply needed the fresh air. The deeper truth, however, was harder to admit. Near the duck pond, something specific made him pause. A little girl in a yellow hoodie and sparkly sneakers was crouched beside a bench, attempting to retrieve a plastic bottle tangled in the grass. Next to her was a woman Logan immediately recognized: Autumn. She knelt down, freed the bottle, and handed it to the child. "Okay, Ellie, where does this go?" Ellie scanned the area, spotted a trash can, and trotted over with the determined focus of someone on an official mission. She dropped the bottle in, turned, and beamed. Logan stopped beneath a tree, remaining just out of view. Ellie tugged Autumn's sleeve, asking, "But Mommy, why do we clean when it's not our trash?" Autumn gently brushed a leaf from her daughter's blonde curls and answered, "Because we don't wait for the world to be kind, baby. We make it kind." Logan's chest tightened at Autumn's simple, profound words. He had built a company, a respected name, and a vast fortune. But had he ever truly taught anyone something so honest, so fundamentally good? Stepping out from the shade of the tree, he announced, "Looks like I found the city's newest cleanup crew." Autumn turned surprised to see him. Ellie, however, lit up immediately. "Mr. Logan." He offered a small bow in return. "Miss Ellie?" Autumn smiled a warm but uncertain expression. She wore jeans and a weathered jacket, her cheeks flushed by the spring breeze. "I didn't expect to see you here," she confessed. "Me neither," he replied, "but I'm glad I did." A comfortable beat of silence passed between them. "Have you two had lunch yet?" Ellie perked up instantly, her eyes wide. "Pizza." Autumn looked as though she might decline the offer, but Logan was already pulling out his phone. "There's a place nearby, wood-fired, with outdoor seating." She glanced at Ellie, then back at him. His smile wasn't practiced or formal. It was simply human and genuine. "Okay," she said, a soft warmth in her voice. "Let's go." They sat beneath a striped umbrella, where Ellie happily colored on a kid's menu, while Autumn lightly picked at her salad. Logan had shed his blazer and rolled up his sleeves, looking for once like someone who wasn't constantly performing. "So," he began, "you teach her ethics now?" Autumn laughed softly. "Only when there's trash involved." "That answer you gave her?" he said, shaking his head slightly. "That was beautiful." She shrugged gently. "I just want her to grow up knowing that kindness isn't something you wait for or have to earn." Logan's voice softened considerably. "Is that how you were raised?" "No," she replied honestly, her gaze distant. "I was raised to hope kindness might show up if you were lucky." She dabbed her mouth with a napkin, her expression turning somber. "After my husband died, I thought grief would be the worst part, but it wasn't. Surviving was waking up every single day pretending I had it together when my entire life was still packed in boxes." Logan listened intently without interrupting. "I thought if I just worked harder, smiled more, and asked for less, I'd be okay. But life doesn't always reward effort. It rewards image." He leaned in, his voice firm. "You're wrong." She raised an eyebrow, surprised. "The world might not always care, but I do. I care about substance." Their eyes met, holding a profound connection. Ellie, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, interrupted it cheerfully, holding up a drawing. "I made us a house," Logan grinned. "A masterpiece." Later, as they walked through the park, the sky had shifted and a cool breeze began to roll in. Ellie sneezed. Autumn instinctively reached into her bag, but Logan was already removing his own coat. He draped it around Ellie's shoulders before anyone could object. "You don't have to," Autumn said gently. "I do," he replied simply. "She's okay, really," Autumn insisted, but he shook his head. A good leader notices who's shivering in silence. Autumn stopped a sudden tightening in her chest, giving way to a profound release. She looked at him, truly looked, seeing not the powerful CEO, nor the distant man from business magazines, but the person who had just made her daughter feel safe and cared for. For the first time, she didn't perceive wealth or power. Instead, she saw presence, warmth, someone who noticed the small, often overlooked things, someone who stayed when it truly mattered. Maybe she thought a quiet hope blooming within her, maybe they weren't so different after all. The elevator ride to Human Resources felt endless. Autumn clutched a thin envelope, her name scrawled on the front with a marker. Brenda had sent the invite that morning, no explanation, just 10 a.m. HR Conference Room B. Autumn already knew precisely what it meant. Inside, the blinds were shut. Brenda sat stiffly at the table next to Mr. Gaines from Legal, a manila folder lying open between them. Autumn didn't need to see its contents. She had already seen the photos online, one of her and Logan walking in Central Park. Ellie perched on his shoulders, another of Logan draping his coat over her daughter. The anonymous gossip forum caption echoed in her head. Single mom scores golden ticket or just knows how to play the game. She had read the comments, CEO's pet. No wonder she got promoted. Now she was here being judged not for her hard work, but for something she had never asked for. Brenda cleared her throat, her expression severe. Ms. Hayes, there's been concern about your relationship with Mr. Whitmore. I'm sure there has, Autumn replied quietly, her voice tinged with resignation. Mr. Gaines from Legal leaned forward, his tone grave. This isn't about mere gossip. It's about perception, liability, and ultimately protecting the company. Brenda then pushed the envelope across the table. This is a voluntary resignation. No fuss, no black marks on your record. Autumn stared at the envelope. Only 2 months ago she had been jobless, sharing a cramped couch with her daughter. She hadn't flirted, hadn't schemed for advantage. She had simply done her work and accepted genuine kindness. Now that very kindness was being weaponized against her. She thought of Ellie, of all the nights she had stayed late to catch up on work, of the mornings she skipped breakfast so her daughter could eat. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. May I have a moment? She asked, her voice steady. Brenda nodded briskly. Of course, but the sooner the better for everyone. Just as Autumn reached for the pen, the door swung open. The room turned in unison as Logan Whitmore walked in. He wore no tie, his sleeves were rolled up, and his expression was unreadable. Mr. Whitmore, this is a private HR meeting. Brenda began, flustered. Then open it, he said, his voice calm but firm. He moved directly to Autumn's side, facing Brenda and Gaines squarely. I've seen the posts, he said calmly, his gaze sweeping over the room. The photos, the assumptions. He looked at Autumn, his expression resolute. I approved her promotion based on merit, ethics, and performance. Gaines cleared his throat, attempting to interject. There are still concerns about optics. Then let's be absolutely clear, Logan said, his voice sharper now, cutting through the pretense. Questioning her integrity means questioning mine. Silence descended. He then turned to Autumn. You don't need to sign that. You've done nothing wrong. Autumn looked at him, truly looked. He wasn't there to simply fix the problem. He was there to stand beside her, not to save her, but to believe in her. Why are you doing this? She whispered. He answered without a moment's hesitation. Because you matter, because the people who work the hardest shouldn't be the ones left most vulnerable. Brenda exhaled, still trying to object. Logan, the optics. Then change the lens. He interrupted, his tone firm. He picked up the voluntary resignation envelope, tore it decisively in two, and dropped the pieces into the trash. Then more gently he addressed Autumn. You're dismissed, Ms. Hayes, from this meeting, not from this company. Autumn blinked, completely overwhelmed. Thank you, she managed to say. You've earned it, Logan replied. As they walked out together, murmurs rippled behind them, but Autumn walked taller, a newfound strength in her stride. Not because Logan had defended her, but because someone finally believed in who she truly was. They reached the elevator. Autumn turned to him, a slight apprehension in her eyes. You know they'll talk even more now. Logan simply smiled. Let them. I'm not afraid of noise. She met his gaze, a quiet resolve settling within her. Neither am I. The elevator doors opened. They stepped in side by side, and in that moment something quietly began to shift between them. For 3 days, Autumn avoided the executive floor. She took early lunches, left late, and carefully steered clear of the glass elevators in the west hallway near Logan's office. It wasn't merely the gossip that bothered her, It was the feeling of being exposed, of being so publicly defended in front of a room full of people who had already written her off. The hardest part wasn't pity. It was belief. A real unflinching belief that felt like a weight she wasn't sure she deserved. Late one night, as she sat on the worn couch of her rented studio apartment, Ellie asleep peacefully in her arms, Autumn's phone lit up with a new email. The message was concise, yet powerful. "You are more than what they say. You are exactly what this company needs. Don't disappear on me. Logan." She read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. Then, without replying, she stared out the window at the city skyline and whispered to herself, "Why does that make it harder?" 2 days later, she received a calendar invite from his assistant. No title, just "Rooftop, 6:15 p.m. Autumn almost declined it. But at 6:12 p.m., she found herself standing at the stairwell door, her heart thudding, her hand resting on the cool metal handle. The rooftop was quiet, the wind soft yet persistent swirling around them. Manhattan stretched out below, vast and indifferent, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. Logan stood near the edge, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his silhouette sharply defined against the darkening sky. He didn't turn when she stepped out. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm. Autumn approached, slowly folding her arms across her chest. "You didn't have to stand up for me like that." Logan glanced at her, his gaze steady. "Actually, I did." A silence settled between them, not awkward but profound and full of unspoken meaning. He finally spoke again. "When I was 12, my little sister died in a fire." Autumn's breath caught. She was 7. "I was supposed to watch her that night, but I was angry at my parents and snuck out to meet a friend. 15 minutes, that's all I was gone." He swallowed hard. 15 minutes. Autumn remained silent, offering him space. She'd made a pillow fort in the living room. Logan continued, his voice heavy. "She knocked over a lamp. The fire spread faster than anyone expected. They told me she probably never even woke up." He looked at Autumn now, his eyes red-rimmed but dry, holding years of unspoken pain. "I've built 100 things since then, but I never stopped trying to build something that would make me feel worthy of still being here." Autumn stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You don't owe anyone redemption, Logan." He looked away briefly. "I know that, but it doesn't stop the needing." Then his voice dropped lower, filled with a newfound clarity. "When I saw you holding your daughter, standing there while everyone judged you, and still showing up with your head held high, I remembered what this was all supposed to be about." He turned to face her fully now, his gaze intense. "You saved someone, not just your daughter, not just yourself. You reminded me why I started this company, and why it absolutely has to matter." Autumn's eyes welled up, but she didn't let the tears fall. She stepped forward, too slowly, carefully, and then, without needing a single more word, she reached out and took his hand. It was warm, solid, and steady. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. For the first time, both felt the quiet hum of something neither had ever known how to name, the profound sense of not being alone anymore. The city roared below them, but up here it felt incredibly distant. There were no job titles, no rumors, no mistakes too big to heal, just 2 people, both broken, yet both brave enough to stay. The rain fell in relentless sheets, soft yet persistent, as Autumn stared out the window of their tiny 1-bedroom apartment. A bucket sat in the corner of the room, steadily collecting drips from the leaking roof. The lights had gone out over an hour ago, and the air was thick with dampness. Ellie was curled beside her on the couch, wrapped tightly in a blanket, whispering, "Mommy, I'm cold." Autumn pulled her daughter closer and kissed her forehead. She reached for her phone, her thumb hovering over one name, Logan. For a moment she hesitated, then typed out a message. "Power's out. Roof's leaking. Ellie shivering. I'm sorry. I just didn't know who else to call." The reply arrived in less than a minute. "I'm on my way. 15 minutes." Logan's SUV pulled up in front of the building just as Autumn stepped outside, holding Ellie close under a small umbrella. Rain plastered her hair to her forehead. Ellie was wrapped in Autumn's jacket, both arms tightly around her mother's neck. Logan quickly jumped out, opened the door, and took the umbrella without a word. He shielded them as he reached for Ellie, gently lifting her into his arms. "You're soaked," he said quietly, his concern evident. "I'm fine," Autumn replied, her voice trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the sudden relief. He didn't argue. His penthouse apartment was warm and softly lit, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Marble countertops gleamed, art adorned the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the raging storm. Autumn stood awkwardly near the grand entrance, dripping and unsure. "I'll get towels," Logan said, already moving to retrieve them. Ellie giggled with delight when he handed her a fluffy robe that reached past her knees. 10 minutes later, Autumn stood barefoot in his kitchen, comfortably dressed in one of Logan's oversized button-up shirts and a pair of dry leggings he had found in a donation box. She stirred pasta on the stove while Ellie played quietly on a plush rug nearby. "You didn't have to cook," Logan said as he walked in, now changed into a soft gray hoodie and joggers. "You drove through a storm for us," she replied gently. "Dinner is the least I can do." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her move with a surprising natural ease, as if she belonged there. "Smells better than anything my chef ever made," he commented. Autumn laughed softly. "That's because it's real food." Later after dinner, the three of them sat together on the couch watching an old animated movie that Ellie had picked out. The little girl leaned comfortably against Logan's chest, her hand curled around his sleeve. Halfway through the film, her breathing evened out. She was fast asleep. Logan looked down at her, then at Autumn, who sat beside him with her knees tucked up under her. "She's out," he whispered softly. Autumn smiled. "She always picks the movie, then never finishes it." There was a long pause, the room filled only with the soft hum of credits rolling on screen and the storm outside easing into a gentle mist. Then Autumn spoke almost too quietly. "I'm scared," she confessed, "of hoping too much." Logan didn't move, didn't speak right away. "I've learned to live without a lot of things," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But the hardest part is letting myself imagine more. A home, a real one. A future where Ellie doesn't grow up watching me struggle. A life where someone stays." He turned to her. Her eyes glistened in the soft light from the screen, and she quickly looked away, embarrassed. "I shouldn't say any of that. Autumn," he interrupted gently. She looked up at him. "Then let me carry that hope for you," Logan said, his voice firm yet tender. "For both of you until you're ready to hold it on your own." Silence. Then a deep breath, a quiet heartbeat. Autumn leaned in, not physically closer, but emotionally. Her shoulders visibly softened, and the protective wall around her cracked just enough to let him in. Ellie shifted in her sleep, still holding on to Logan's arm. He smiled down at the little girl, then met Autumn's gaze once more. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, just raw truth and something undeniably real. 1 year later, Autumn Hayes stood just off stage at the front of a packed auditorium wearing a simple blazer and a name badge that proudly read, "Director of Training and Development, Grant & Co." Not long ago, she had been counting quarters for diapers. Now she was leading a significant initiative specifically for single mothers, much like the woman she used to be. Out front, Ellie, now 4, sat in the front row, her blonde curls tied into 2 bouncy ponytails, waving proudly at her mom. Beside her sat Logan Whitmore, still impeccably polished in a navy suit, but somehow radiating a newfound warmth and ease. His entire attention was locked on the 2 girls who had changed everything in his life. The press conference began, and Logan stepped confidently to the podium. "Today, we're launching more than just a policy," he announced, his voice resonating with conviction. "This is personal. It's called New Roots, for parents who kept going even when life told them to stop, for the ones who were invisible but never gave up." Applause filled the room, but Logan's eyes remained fixed on Autumn and Ellie sitting in the front row. They were his profound reasons for everything. Later that afternoon, the three of them walked hand in hand through the park behind the building. Ellie skipped joyfully in the middle, Autumn on one side, Logan on the other. They didn't speak of love, they didn't have to. Ellie's tiny fingers swinging happily between them said it all. On a subsequent Saturday in the park, sunlight spilled through tall trees as dozens of kids gathered for a free dance class. Ellie in a yellow tutu and sparkly sneakers twirled dramatically while Logan knelt to retie her shoes. "Coach Ellie's ready for her big debut," he teased. Autumn walked over, laughing softly, carrying a tote of homemade cookies on her arm. "As long as she doesn't try to choreograph the whole thing again," she chuckled. Ellie twirled towards them with unrestrained joy. "Mommy, Daddy, watch me." Autumn froze. "Daddy." It had slipped out so naturally, so effortlessly. Logan didn't flinch. He simply looked at Autumn and gently reached for her hand, which she readily accepted. That night, Logan's penthouse kitchen was filled with quiet music and the soft clink of dishes. Autumn stood at the sink rinsing plates. On the couch, Ellie was fast asleep, curled up in a blanket, still clutching the same stuffed giraffe she had carried into that job interview a year ago. Logan stepped in and handed Autumn a folded paper. She dried her hands, opened it, and froze. Transfer of Equity Grant and Co. It wasn't a flashy gesture, but it signified real security, real trust. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I did." Logan replied, his voice gentle but firm. "It's not a gift, it's recognition. You didn't just change this company, Autumn. You changed me." He stepped closer, taking her hand in his. "I used to think I had everything, but I didn't have a home, not until you two walked into my life." Autumn reached up, her fingers lightly touching his cheek. "Home isn't a place," she said softly. "It's people who stay." And then they kissed. There was no rush, no dramatic fireworks, just a profound warmth and the quiet, undeniable feeling of finally being exactly where they belonged. The wedding was small, beautifully simple. It took place on a beach surrounded by close friends with bare feet sinking into warm sand. Autumn walked down a path strewn with flowers, Ellie skipping ahead, joyfully tossing petals in every direction. Logan waited at the end, barefoot in linen, his heart shining in his eyes. The officiant smiled warmly. "Do you, Logan Whitmore, take this woman and her daughter into your heart, your life, your forever?" Logan looked at them both, his voice full of certainty. "I already have." "And do you, Autumn Hayes, take this man not just for yourself, but as a father to your child and a partner in every storm to come?" Autumn's voice cracked with pure joy. "With all my heart." Ellie stood between them, holding both their hands, a perfect bridge. Together back at Grant and Coping. A new banner now proudly hung above the doors of the New Roots Training Center, proclaiming, "Every parent deserves a second chance. Every child deserves a future." And down a quiet hallway, the three of them walked, hand in hand, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. No longer CEO and job applicant, no longer strangers from two different worlds. They were simply a family built on grace and a love that asked for nothing but honesty. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was something far better because they hadn't given up. They found something greater than success. They found home. Sometimes what feels like the end of the road is truly just the beginning of something beautiful. Autumn didn't walk into that interview looking for a miracle. She showed up with courage and dignity, and she walked out with a second chance, a new future, and a family she never saw coming. Because kindness isn't weakness, and love doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It simply shows up and stays. If this story touched you, tap the hype button and subscribe to Soul Storing Stories for more tales that remind us hope is never out of reach. Thank you for watching.